Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last session of the second day of the Global Foresight Summit. This year is organized by the APF, the Association of Professional Futurists, the World Future Review, and Fast Forward. And we have for this last session Marcela Sabino. Marcela is the Head of Innovation at the Museu d'Alemanya and has worked as its lab director over 5 years. She's going to talk about getting your hands dirty, the urgency of prototyping better futures. So welcome, Marcela.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's great to have seen the presentations. I'm going to start sharing the screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So I'd like to talk today about getting your hands dirty and the urgency of prototyping better futures. So a bit about myself, as was explained, I'm a Foresight strategist, creative director, innovation designer. I've had over 16 years of experience in the areas of emerging technologies, art and culture, and international development. And I've worked on projects such as AI, VR, digital and biofabrication, robotics, big data, Internet of Things, and also have done work with the World Bank, IFC, UN, and IDB. So I'll talk a little bit of that as we go. I'll first talk about the Museum of Tomorrow and Lab, what is prototyping and why it's so important, some examples, and then some rapid fire exercises at the end. So starting with the Museum of Tomorrow, it's an applied science and technology museum in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. It was inaugurated on December 2015, and this is the building there. It's right on the Mauá Square on the water. And the ethical axes of the museum are sustainability, so how we want to live with the planet, and conviviality, how we want to live with each other, as well as knowledge and innovation. And the key message we have is tomorrow is today, and today is a place for action. It's a museum of questions. It's structured around 5 main provocations. So where do we come from? Where are we heading to? And how do we want to go? We've had over 5 million visitors in a little over 5 years. 40% are not regular museum visitors, and 10% have never been to museums. So it's quite unique in that sense. So here you can see the museum with the solar panels up. Sustainability is really important for the museum. It was a design by Santiago Calatrava. And the idea, there's various concepts of sustainability here in the building itself. So the AC receives water from the bay, the cold part of the bay, and it goes through the AC system to lower it and to conserve energy. The HVAC system is automated and always being kind of tested for optimal performance. And the water from the bay is filtered and put in the water features around, which also lower the temperature for the visitors around, because anybody who knows Rio, it's quite hot. So technology, the visitors are tracked with an RFID system that speaks in Portuguese, English, and Spanish. And the entire experience is digital. And at the end, visitors can interact with the Iris artificial intelligence. And there's a very big importance of seeing itself as part of the community. The museum has 5,000 neighbors who have free visitor cards so that they can come in as much as possible. We do work depending on the year with 50 to 90,000 students per year. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So I can't go over everything, but a few highlights. Here is the area of what humans have created. So it's thousands of photos on how humans have produced, how we love, how we work, how we mourn, how we celebrate. And there are photos from all over the world. Every time I go there, I see something different. And then also the Anthropocene. So this is this kind of 6 huge, monolithic, megalithic structures, that's kind of towering in on you, with kind of 2,000 square feet of LED. This is really telling you about how humans have become a geological force. We also have programs that kind of blur the boundaries of the museum and the society. This is teacher training, and we look at some ancestral forms of knowledge. So here in particular is medicinal, traditional Brazilian herbs and traditional plants. Also, this is the neighbors program I was telling you about. We want to get our neighbors, which are a lot of them from lower income space, to come and be part of the program. And then 2 very important groups of people: African matrices, which are very, very present and relevant in the past and also in the future of Brazil, as well indigenous matrices. Here's our program of Between Museums, where we take students from from the public school system, from the school systems, and kind of get them imbued with this love of museums, not just Museum of Tomorrow, but many other museums around. Here is the museum. You can see it from this is where the entrance. On the left is the lab. And this is the lab, the behind the scenes. This is where we worked before the pandemic. And it's an innovation and experimentation platform at the intersection of science, art, and technology. And our focus is really to prototype a more social and sustainable future using traditional and exponential technologies through a transdisciplinary approach. So that means that everything we do is a prototype, whether it's digital or physical. It follows the 2 ethical axes of the museum, so sustainability and conviviality. It uses traditional, so high and low tech, and we always try to get different disciplines there to use the processes, methodologies to kind of make the prototype richer and more relevant. So we do 4 main things: exhibitions, fellowships, workshops, and experimentation and prototyping. And to show you a little bit more about what we do, this is Strolling Through a Hacked Rio. This exhibition tries to get people to see the city as a computer system that they can hack and improve. So here you have an example of an urban farm. Also, there's examples of graffiti, and also, things that people do in Rio a lot, or put orchids in certain on plants to beautify the area. There are urban libraries and bus stops, examples of kind of, creating bike paths, guerrilla bike paths where people go by night and create them to try to get public policy to follow along. Interlace is an exhibition that was a culmination of a 5-month residency of 14 designers, technologists, programmers that were trying to think about what the future of fashion could be like, that what would be a positive future of fashion. So we taught them 3D printing, laser cutting, biofabrication, and electronics, so that they could create various different concepts of clothing as an interface. So on the left-hand side, you can see a cyclist jacket that can kind of signal where the cyclist will turn. That becomes a backpack, which is that thing in blue right next to it. Next to that is the wedding dress made from kombucha. So it's biofabricated and also with 3D pieces and a motor underneath, so it becomes 2 dresses. We also have on the left-hand side a dress that is lit up by LEDs made from recycled computer wire that has been crocheted, and it changes according to the heat of the wear, how hot and how movement the person is having. Here you can see the exhibition from above. And then we also had massaging shoes, necklaces with sensors for danger that would send out SMS to people if you said a specific word. So various concepts like that. Edible Future was really around this concept of, theme of the museum in 2019, which was how can we feed 10 billion people in the decade of 2050. So this was a project from a Dutch food futurist, Chloe Wetzerveld, who was a fellow with us. And the concept here was to think about food in a totally different way. How can we think about it as a system that is digestive, so goes in the manner that we digest things rather than just eating things normally. So we have a specific order of digestion, and these foods were made in capsules in that way. Ofisuka 2068. Ofisuka means office home in Japan. This was a concept of what the future of work could be in 50 years. So this idea where people could, potentially, instead of working 11 months of the year and taking off 1 month, that would be reversed, and they would work on specific, highly, hyper creative projects where an AI system could, join people of different disciplines, temperaments, and complementary skills in a ofisuka in some place in the world to live and work in this place. So here you see a concept of a 3D printer that prints based on your genome. That's the 3D printer on the right hand side. The concept of a prototyping machine where you have an exoskeleton that was made by a block of biopolymer that every ofisuka would have, and it also had this kind of a printer, but also a laser to kind of cure this biopolymer block. On the left hand side is a gel refrigerator that every person had a little gel pod that is specifically tailored to their own genome also. So thinking about this future that could possibly have, lots of, kind of personalized things for people. And in the back, you had these kind of pods that stick out that are the or neuronaut working station. These are people who are able to take people's dreams and kind of, put them in a way that helps them with their creative projects. So getting into virtual reality, Repengio was a techno-shamanic experience in VR that three people could come into a space and they could interact with each other and see the energy in their hands. And the idea with this was to create a journey that that people could experience the problems with the dissociation between human and nature and go through an indigenous ritual where they would be able to restore the balance again. So this was actually a holographic indigenous woman that we volumetrically scanned in a studio, and then we created this whole ritual around it. Aya and Her World of Creative AIs is an exhibition about creative AIs in the creative space. So you can, have your expression. They could be sent a meme based on your expression. If you smiled, your face would go onto a screen there on, like you see on the right hand side. This is really to get people more used to AI, but also to generate questions like, is this the kind of, it was fun and engaging, all interactive, but questioning like, is this what we want? What could be other uses, and getting people to think around that. So the fellowship program, we had a fellowship, the first virtual reality artistic performance in South America, and so this is talking about this healing the relationship between technology and self. This is our first fellow, Stuart Candy, amazing. I'm sure many of you know that he did work on this guerrilla art project called Posterity. So thinking of posters for the future and putting them out into the city. Food on Mars. So this is like, again, with that food topic, thinking about how we can think about the big bases of food, potentially spirulina and cyanobacteria that would be on Mars, but also add sensory dimension to it that could potentially make it better or different. And also, we wrote the first samba by an AI in the world with our fellow Harshit Argwal from MIT Media Lab. And an experimental boot camp where we experimented with VR and came up with 3 different experiences. And here is that residency that I mentioned in the beginning, resulting in that exhibition. So very quickly over the workshops, I know I'm going over very quickly, but I want to get to some things for you to be able to use this kind of thinking. So the Internet of Things, thinking about the hardware, software, and visualization of data in the Internet of Things. Responsive architecture, so using pneumatic structures and different kinds of things of the architecture being able to respond to people. And then lastly, experimentation and arts and prototyping, obviously before the pandemic. And really just to say that, we work hard and play hard in the lab because prototyping is hard work. It's a lot of facing failures. So you need to have a light spirit. So now I want to get to the point where why should you prototype and why is it so important for all of us? So as we know, We are facing many existential crises at the same time, which reinforce each other. So climate change, the decline of natural resources, the collapse of ecosystems and loss of biodiversity, new pandemics, we don't even want to talk about that one, pollution, food insecurity, nuclear and biological warfare, and uncontrolled technology, or even unethical use of technology. And you are needed, because we need a diversity at the table. We need creativity, new perspectives. We need a transdisciplinary approach, unique solutions, different geographies, and different points of view to create better futures. So prototyping is so important because it's the way to turn ideas tangible, and it's a way to test them too. So why do we prototype? We do it to capture these ideas that are floating around in our head and put it out there, and something that can be understood by others. And as we put it out there, we can recalibrate it, right? So we can, we can get people to comment, we can change, and then we can test it out and see how it actually functions in the real world. So it takes these ideas and you can use them in a very low cost way, so that you can find out if you should put your resources and attention and efforts to that idea. There's many different kinds of prototypes. You can do sketches to transmit quickly an idea, storyboard to look at the user experience. You can do paper, so tactile, to get people to manipulate it. You can think about user journeys or role playing, which think about the user in the space, or you can do models to think about how these things would work. So here's some examples of how we've prototyped. On the left hand, you can see us trying to hack a Kinect, which came from the Xbox 360. You can see it's not working well, but then after many prototypes, we're able to get it so that it became, we were actually able to give it to people who were able to use a CNC machine to make this, this bust that we can then put in the exhibition. And it's really about maximizing the rate of learning by minimizing the time to try ideas. And really, I really want you guys to come out with this idea that doing is the best type of thinking. We oftentimes think so much, think and write, but that often doesn't translate into things in the real world. And doing really helps. And the error is the way. You can see somebody getting super motion sick in this picture, and it happens, but it means it's working. So let's go quickly over a look behind some of the prototypes so you can be inspired and see how this works. So this is I showed you guys the exhibition on edible futures. And this was, kind of maybe the fourth or fifth prototype that we had of this. And it looks this way because the first prototypes did not have enough. We showed it to food researchers, and they mentioned, one of the things that makes food delicious and good to eat is the different textures. So there's not enough texture here. So make some more. And that's why we were able to kind of iterate and iterate so that you can see many different textures. This is a prototype made from clay. This is one that we weren't able to get it right the first time, and then we saw some computer cable lying around, and we're able to prototype a way to crochet this and put LEDs on it. So that worked, and we were able to make a dress that actually functioned later on. Shoes made from kombucha. So this is something that we're doing in the lab. It's quite a stinky process if you guys have done it, but this took us a while to get to the point where you could sew it and it wouldn't fall apart. So many prototypes there, and sewing in the lab with thread, and this is machine sewn. And the well-being corset, which we made several versions of, also testing, iterating small pieces of it. And 3D printed food. This is actually 3D printed. It's not food material. It's other material, but it gives us a sense of the size of it, how you would actually eat it and manipulate it. So we could actually prototype these alternative protein bites, which are edible. We did eat them with spirulina, with other kinds of things, and using processes from molecular gastronomy to very ancestral processes, and with the insects and all these kinds of things, as you can see there. This is another type of prototype where we were looking at, like thinking, will these green modular pieces, will that work in terms of, weight and all these kinds of things, so we could talk to specialists and see if we're doing it right or not. The indigenous VR hologram, so that shape you saw in the beginning was this woman. Lots of prototypes to get there. And now I'm going to go super quickly over these rapid fire exercises. this idea of how to see, right? So if I ask you what color is it, most people will blurt out blue, right, at the beginning. But actually, there's dark blues, there's light blues, there's white, there's a bit of brown and black. And sometimes what we see, a businessman, but maybe he's a K-pop lover, a closet entrepreneur, a repository for bacteria. As we know, we have lots of bacterial cells in us, dishwasher, recycler. So we need to start looking at things in upside down, opposite. What would be the opposite? What is it when you take it out of its context? What is the opposite context, and how would that work? How do we use imagination into this? How do we think about how this would be done in the past or in the future? And how to think, right? So thinking hurts. Our brain is 2% of our body weight, but uses 25% of our energy. And we're no longer, in the savannas of Africa, where many things did not happen during the day. And then maybe one point of excitement where you're chased by some kind of animal. But today it's very different. So you can see how much information is coming at us. And really, our senses do gather around 11 million bits from the environment, but our conscious mind can only process 50 bits per second. So our mind takes shortcuts, reuses patterns to conserve energy, because the brain is an energy hog. So there's even some neuroscientists who think that 40% of what 40% of what comes into us is what we see, and then the other 60%, or a large proportion, is made from patterns or past experiences. So we don't have to, use all this energy to have the sensory piece there. This is why we need to examine the assumptions that construct our perspective, right? Because our frames are the perceptions that shape our world. So things like, we won't be able to do it here, but this idea of like, what are your assumptions? First think about what they are. For example, it's important to be productive. That's a big one in the United States. We have to be productive to be worthy, or we're not alone in the universe, or my political beliefs are the right ones. So what are your assumptions, and what are they generating? Are they limiting you from something? Are they making you not see the whole picture? And also the why, we often forget about this, but that's how we prototype the right thing. And then question storm, rather than just brainstorm. There's so many answers out there, but questions are really the answer, according to Hal Gregerson. What assumptions we take for granted, focus on the root cause. What is really underneath? What is the underlying piece to this? Think about what ifs, or how might we's. Why do we do things this way? These kinds of things. Signals and drivers, I'm sure you've heard a lot of that, but things that kind of perk your ear up. So things like some farmers in Bangladesh have switched to raising ducks instead of chickens because during catastrophic floods, ducks float. And so the drivers of this is climate change. So looking at, the social, technology, environmental, economic, political, and values, thinking of those frameworks, like what are you seeing that kind of perks you up, and this is different. This is something we haven't seen before. And also the second and third order consequences plus opportunities. So I adapted this idea, but this idea, like for example, even if you look at the news and start thinking in this way, for example, the first order consequences is social distancing because of COVID. Second order, so more workers are forced to stay at home. A third order could be companies must rethink business models, especially if new emergencies arise in the future. And then opportunity, more companies may want to accelerate investments in technology and robots, or other kinds of programs to retool their employees, and this might be across the board. So where are the opportunities there? So we can have that mentality when looking at the news. And then to end, this is the iterative process that I would suggest, and I hope this is something you take into your life and start using this week. This idea of sensing, following your creativity, contemplating your assumptions, again, that as we talked about, where do they come from? Are they real, actually? So questioning, determining what you want to learn with this particular prototype that you're doing, identify critical questions, experiment. That's one of the most important parts. You learn through doing, using creative tools to think about the topic in divergent, lateral ways, completely different. What we talked about, like kind of flipping it around, taking it out of context, using imagination, design an experiment, or many that will answer specific questions. and then learn. So evaluate what you've done, what happened, what worked, what didn't, what questions arose in this new phase, and what are the next small tests that you can do to improve. So you can see there's not a closed circle. It is basically an iterative process that keeps on going on. And so with that, thank you very much. I'm happy to connect with anybody to continue this conversation. I love talking about this kind of stuff on LinkedIn. You can connect with me there, and we can also chat here. So thank you very much to everybody, and looking forward to talking to you guys. Okay. So I am reading some of the questions here in the end. Let's see here. 1 second. So let me know if anybody has any questions. I'm going through them. Is it possible to do a virtual visit to the amazing museum? Yes, we have definitely a few virtual visits of exhibitions, Bart. So yes, you can look at those at the website of the museum. We have an exhibition, the Corona scene now. We have food for 10 billion people that I mentioned. So lots of great things to take a look at there. Okay. So Prashant talks about Jeff Hawkins' A Thousand Brains is fun to integrate with how to see and why we do things. Yeah, very. That is something that I think that a lot of people are exploring now, and I think that if we can really think about that on our own, how are we seeing? We know that we see such a small part of the visual spectrum. It's a tiny part. If there's things that you can look at online, you'll see that. So it's a really interesting place for you to explore. So yeah, fantastic. And glad Bibiana has been to the Museum of Tomorrow. Amazing experience. I'm glad you came, and hopefully we've had some. We closed and then reopened recently. As you know, in Brazil things are a little bit complex, but we do have an exhibition on the Corona scene in the museum now, which is this combination of the Anthropocene and the coronavirus. The idea of the convergence of how the humans as a global force have changed the world, and how it's been responsible for many of the issues that we're seeing today. So I think I've answered the questions. If anybody else wants to ask any more questions, I'm here. Let's think. So thank you for Dream Food for the Future Dreams. Aki, it was very interesting because people either loved or hated that kind of food. You would hear people saying things like, "Oh, this. I hope to be dead before this future of food comes to pass." And actually, there's no future of food, and we had to create it. So that's an interesting thing, and I think that. Some people loved it. Some people, said, "I wish I had this because I can, personalize it to my own needs, and I wouldn't have to think about anything anymore." So I think that those kinds of provocations are really interesting, especially when you're thinking about prototyping is very good, because you getting the reaction, of these possible futures gets people to either want to build that future or to build away from that future. And that's why we need everybody to really prototype together and to put these ideas and concepts and to get people thinking, and not we have a lot of large companies that have dominated a lot of the conversation around tech, but we need these startups, these provocateurs to be there and to actually put new things out there. Derek, hello Derek. Scenario simulation. Yeah, so we actually do this. We actually when we do our projects, we start building this world that we would like to create. So it's kind of building these scenarios, but also thinking almost in terms of how people who create science fiction stories and kind of movies and stuff. That's how we do it. We have the big book of like what this world is. And then we start to think about what kinds of things would be in this world. So what kinds of prototypes would be in this world. So, speculative design issues. We like to make the prototypes as functional as possible. So we do work with technology. We work with the Institute of Technology to do stuff around spirulina and actually growing it, and also we had a biofarm with 3,000 mealworms and 35 cockroaches and all these kinds of things, where we actually then use them and did the whole process of doing the insect farm and freezing them and then putting them into foods and testing it out. So yeah, we do that, and we try to get it as close as possible to reality, even if we're going 50 years out there. Any plans to replicate the museum in other parts of the world? Peter asked that question. So, Peter, yes, the concept is kind of what is actually a museum. So that's a really interesting concept. What does it actually mean? And that's one thing that we I think everybody should make their own museum in a sense. Like, it's something that questions, that gets you to look differently at things. So definitely experiences of the museum, not a building in that kind of sense, because I maybe we need to think about this in different ways. Like, can museum be an experience on your phone that goes through a certain way of thinking? So I think that's what we need to ask. Like, what are assumptions about a museum? What are assumptions about an experience? Um, so Sylvain Cotong says, I see robots, humanoids, and holograms together with humans, and why not plants and animals visiting and interacting with the museum? Well, I love that. That's awesome, because that's really thinking outside the box. It's really kind of, getting people thinking, what does it mean to be in a museum? What does it mean to visit a museum? What is experience that's in you? That's one of the things that we started with, this idea of art. One of our questions for art, we did an experience, a kind of a residency, which was thinking about how people can influence the artwork. And then we kind of got people artists to learn electronics and interface design, all these kinds of things, so they could create art that would change based on people coming nearby. That was actually our first project. I love that right, Rika Reich is planning to grow seaweed at home. Please do. Spirulina, there's a lot of information on it, and don't be scared to go out and find this information. This is exactly what we did. I want people to feel that. That's why I want to talk about the behind the scenes, because people can really do this at home. There's so many tutorials, there's so many things, and all you need to do is kind of fail your way to success. That's what I would suggest, and that's exactly what we did. So do it. It is great. Spirulina is one of the things that has so much protein. It's very good for you, and you can grow it on a countertop using an LED. That's what we did, and leave the LED on. It uses very low energy, and you can leave it on 24 hours a day. So that's a great idea, and I hope you share the pictures with me. Yes, try it. All right. I think our time is up, but I wanted to thank all you guys so much for this. It's been fantastic. And please prototype, try it out, send me pictures. I'm happy to interact with you guys on LinkedIn or anywhere else. And good luck prototyping. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Marcela. It's been a fantastic presentation, and I'm sure all the people in the audience would like to travel to Rio to visit the Museo da Magna. Thank you to everyone. Our second day ends here, so we are back tomorrow at 8 a.m. Central European Time. So yeah, have a good night or good rest of the day if you are in Latam or in America, and see you tomorrow. Thank you, Marcela.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.